The Jedi Temple on Coruscant hummed quietly as dawn stretched across the skyline, painting the endless sea of spires in golden light. The towering durasteel buildings that formed the city world stood like silent witnesses to the transformations that took place within the temple's ancient halls. The day was supposed to begin like any other. Initiates and Padawans training in the courtyard, masters conferring about the galaxy's troubles, and the ever-present sense of the Force weaving through every corridor. Yet, something unusual stirred among the Jedi that morning. A matter whispered about with both hope and unease. Word had spread that Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi had returned from a mission on Tatooine with extraordinary news of a boy named Anakin Skywalker, a child so strong in the Force that some believed he might be the prophesied chosen one. None in the temple doubted Qui-Gon's integrity, but the boy's future was anything but certain. That day, the Council found itself confronted with a dilemma that would change the course of the galaxy. Master Yoda, perched on his small seat in the Jedi Council chamber, listened intently to the discussion that spiraled around him. Seated in a circle, the Council debated the merits and dangers of bringing Anakin into the Order. Mace Windu, his posture straight and tense, wondered whether they should risk training someone so old or so dangerously powerful. Mundi questioned the veracity of the prophecy, while Plo Koon and Cc Tyan exchanged careful looks that suggested the Council was not of one mind. Obi-Wan Kenobi, standing beside his fallen master's seat, yearned to fulfill Qui-Gon's last wish, to train Anakin. He was prepared to do so, more out of loyalty than pure conviction. But as the voices in the chamber rose and fell, Yoda quietly absorbed their words, sifting through them for truth. When the time came for him to speak, he did so in a measured, thoughtful tone. The child, he declared, was too old. Fear clung to him, and fear was a path to the dark side, a risk that could not be underestimated. Yet Yoda could not deny the powerful surge he felt in the Force whenever he considered the boy's presence. It was as if countless strands of future possibility converged upon this child's destiny. Could the prophecy be correct? If so, to turn him away could be as fateful a mistake as to train him unwisely. The Council had rarely been so divided, and the tension wrapped itself around the room like an invisible cord. Eventually, with a careful nod, Yoda brought forth a surprising suggestion. If the boy was indeed the chosen one, if the Force truly called him to the Jedi path, then training must proceed with the utmost caution. A powerful teacher would be required, one who understood the intricacies of the Force better than anyone else in the Order. A master whose wisdom spanned centuries. That master would be Yoda himself. Silence filled the room. Obi-Wan, expecting to fulfill Qui-Gon's final request, felt his heart twist. He admired and revered Yoda, but he also wanted to take on the responsibility for his master's sake. Mace Windu, thinking of the precarious balance this child represented, was relieved that if Anakin were to be trained at all, it would be by the greatest living Jedi. Slowly, the Council members nodded their agreement, and so the decision was made. Anakin Skywalker would be trained from the first day he set foot in the temple by Master Yoda. No one present in that moment could guess how events would unfold, but the Force seemed to resonate with the importance of this choice. Not long after, the boy was brought before the Council. He stood in awe of the tall chamber, dwarfed by the presence of wise masters all around him, but his eyes were warm and full of curiosity. He clutched a small bag containing the meager belongings from his life as a slave on Tatooine. Whenever his gaze found Yoda, he felt a strange mix of nervousness and admiration. Though physically small, the ancient Jedi Master loomed large in the Force, and Anakin sensed a gentle warmth in him. Yoda, staff in hand, stepped forward, his ears twitching slightly as he observed the boy. The others watched from their seats. Fear, excitement, longing. These emotions swirled within Anakin, and Yoda perceived them clearly. Placing a wrinkled hand on Anakin's shoulder, he spoke softly, "A new journey. Begin for you." "It does. Trained in the ways of the Jedi you will be if ready you are." Anakin nodded vigorously, his eyes shining. Inside his young heart, relief and exhilaration mingled. For the first time in his life, he felt free and guided. his dreams of helping his mother and freeing slaves everywhere seeming closer than ever. Thus began Anakin Skywalker's apprenticeship under the venerable Master Yoda. In the days that followed, Yoda guided the boy through the temple's labyrinthine halls, introducing him to the places where he would study and meditate. The hush of the Grand Library enthralled Anakin, its towering shelves crammed with ancient holocrons and volumes that detailed centuries of Jedi knowledge. He saw the training rooms, with their wooden floors and carefully designed obstacles, where he would learn lightsaber forms and stances. He saw the open courtyards where Jedi often meditated beneath the sprawl of sky and clouds, drawing upon the Force in serenity or letting it guide them through practice drills. All the while, Yoda spoke in riddles and proverbs, peppered with his trademark syntax, forcing Anakin to listen carefully and ask questions. And always, Yoda observed the child's reactions, quietly watching for signs of the fear and anger they all dreaded. At first, Anakin struggled to adapt to the Jedi way. He was used to hard work. He had endured years of slavery under Watto, fixing starships and pod racers in Tatooine's scorching sun. But the temple's discipline was different. There was no immediate reward as there had been with winning races or pleasing Watto. Instead, the reward was subtle. A deeper understanding of the Force, a quiet sense of connection that transcended all else. Sometimes Anakin was bored by the long meditations. Other times, he grew impatient with the slow progression of lightsaber training, yearning to dive into more advanced exercises. Yet Yoda remained patient, gently reminding Anakin that power, if untempered, could lead one astray. Day after day, Yoda taught Anakin the art of mindfulness. The child would sit cross-legged on a cushion in one of the temple's smaller meditation alcoves while Yoda instructed him to breathe and let go of attachment. It was not easy. Anakin's thoughts constantly drifted to his mother, left behind on Tatooine. Yoda noticed how the boy would twitch, clench his fists, or open his eyes mid-session when memories disturbed him. Concerned, Yoda offered comforting words, speaking of how each Jedi faced separation from family. But he also reminded Anakin that compassion must not become possession, that love must not become an anchor that weighed him down with fear. As weeks turned to months, the initial stir among the other Padawans grew. Stories circulated about the boy from Tatooine who was so strong in the Force that Master Yoda himself took him under his wing. Some initiates, who had long admired Yoda and hoped to study under him, felt pangs of jealousy. Others were intrigued and sought Anakin's friendship. Anakin, in turn, found himself adjusting. If anyone else teased him, he often responded in frustration, but Yoda gently encouraged him to maintain calm. Over time, he learned to redirect that energy into focus. On one crisp morning, Yoda brought Anakin to a quiet courtyard where the leaves of a solitary tree rustled in the breeze. The courtyard was high in the temple spires, open to the broad cityscape of Coruscant. The metallic glint of starships and speeders passing by in bright lanes underscored the hum of life in the capital. Standing on a worn patch of stone, Yoda produced a small training lightsaber. The handle was plain, unadorned, a tool for learning, not for show. When he handed it to Anakin, the boy's excitement was palpable, though he tried to hide it behind a steady face. The hum of the blade as he ignited it sent shivers of exhilaration through him. Yoda nodded approvingly, but reminded him that the lightsaber was a Jedi's final resort, not his first. They proceeded with Form I basics, practicing slow arcs and angled parries. The ancient master moved with surprising nimbleness, demonstrating each movement with graceful precision. Anakin tried to replicate them, often stumbling or losing his balance, but Yoda praised progress instead of perfection. The days tumbled into weeks, and the weeks into months. As time passed, Anakin's connection with the Force deepened. He could feel its currents in ways that astounded him, like a breeze that guided his every step if he allowed it. Yoda recognized that Anakin's raw talent was immense, but so was the boy's emotional range. Nothing was small about him, whether it was his curiosity, his joy, his anger, or his ambition. The potential for good was as vast as the potential for darkness. Their sessions often stretched late into the evening, especially when Anakin's inquisitiveness drove him to ask question after question. Yoda's answer was usually another question, which forced Anakin to discover truths for himself. The ancient Jedi took particular care to show Anakin the living force, the presence in every life form, from the tiny green shoots in the garden to the swirling shapes of distant star clusters. Anakin, for his part, found wonder in it all. The other council members watched the boy's progress from afar. Mace Windu still harbored reservations. He saw in Anakin a restlessness that could easily tip into arrogance if not carefully contained. Ki-Adi-Mundi, though warmer, also advised vigilance. Obi-Wan, meanwhile, wrestled with complex emotions. He had promised his dying master, Qui-Gon, that he would train the boy, but how could he argue against Yoda's wisdom? Instead, Obi-Wan settled into his own status as a newly minted knight, giving what support he could to Anakin whenever their paths crossed. Their relationship, though not that of master and Padawan, grew into a gentle mentorship. Anakin looked up to Obi-Wan, who had a calm, steady presence, not unlike Yoda's, but tempered by the lessons of youth and recent grief. Occasionally, Anakin would have nightmares. They often centered on his mother, Shmi, and the danger she might be in back on Tatooine. One particularly painful dream left him shaking in his bed, tears running down his face. Sensing the disturbance, Yoda arrived at Anakin's small dormitory room in the temple. The child explained how he had seen an image of Tatooine's harsh suns beating down on his mother, who seemed lost in a vast desert. Yoda's ears lowered in empathy. He comforted the boy, but also reminded him that fear of loss could become a chain if not released. Attachment, while born of good intentions, could sow the seeds of desperation. Anakin nodded but did not entirely understand. The ache in his chest told him that some part of him was unwilling to let go. In time, Yoda began introducing more advanced lightsaber techniques. For this, they often went to a private dojo within the temple that was reserved for quiet, specialized instruction. The walls bore old tapestries depicting legendary Jedi victories and lessons from ancient times. The floor was polished to a gleam, reflecting the overhead lights. Here, Yoda showed Anakin how to incorporate the Force into his movements, how to let it guide his reflexes so that he became an extension of its will rather than a mere fighter. He taught Anakin to sense an opponent's intent before they attacked, so that the boy could parry almost preemptively. Under Yoda's careful eye, Anakin's skill blossomed rapidly. He was unusually quick and strong, even for a Jedi apprentice, a trait that surprised other masters who occasionally visited to watch. Yet Yoda continuously reminded him that prowess with a blade was only one facet of being a Jedi. True mastery came from wisdom and discipline. Between training sessions, Anakin often found solace in the temple's libraries. He marveled at the stories of past Jedi, especially those who had faced overwhelming adversity and emerged victorious. Tales of the Sith War both intrigued and frightened him. He read about Jedi who had been tempted by the dark side, who had lost their way. Sometimes, late at night, he would stare at the ancient sketches of Sith Lords in hidden archives, wondering how anyone could stray so far. His curiosity was boundless, which Yoda privately recognized as both a blessing and a risk. The lure of forbidden knowledge could be difficult to resist, especially for someone who had felt powerless for so much of his life. Despite the rigorous training, Yoda made sure Anakin had moments of normalcy. Time to bond with other Padawans, to laugh over simple games, to wander through the temple gardens. At first, Anakin wasn't sure how to make friends. He had been an outsider in every sense, a slave boy from Tatooine who had soared into the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Yet a few children warmed to him, fascinated by his tales of pod racing. He recounted with pride how he had raced against seasoned pilots and won, how he had fixed his own pod racer. Though some teased him, calling him the chosen fix-it boy, others admired his technical genius. Gradually, Anakin formed friendships that allowed him to feel less isolated. But now and again, his intense drive to excel caused friction. Some peers found him arrogant, others were inspired by his example, and a rare few feared the raw power they sensed in him. One day, after a practice session, Master Windu approached Yoda. He had been watching Anakin spar with another Padawan and saw the speed with which Anakin had disarmed his opponent. There was a hint of caution in Mace's eyes. He expressed concern that the boy was advancing too quickly in his physical abilities while lacking the emotional maturity to match it. Yoda merely nodded. He understood Mace's apprehension all too well, for he felt it himself. Yet his faith in the Force led him to persevere. The boy had a bright soul, overshadowed by the ghosts of fear and longing. If guided properly, Yoda believed Anakin could fulfill an extraordinary role in restoring balance. But if neglected, that same potential could become a devastating force. Months turned into a year and then two. By now, Anakin had grown taller, and while still younger than many Padawans at his level, he carried an unusual confidence in his step. Yoda had taught him not only to respect the Force but to read it like a gentle stream. Anakin's skill in deflecting training remotes and sensing the subtleties of others' emotions increased dramatically. But he could still be impulsive, particularly when faced with challenges he thought unfair. Yoda's instructions often tested his patience, insisting he revisit the basics of Form I or endure hour-long meditations that left him restless. Yet, in these small struggles, Yoda saw Anakin's character being shaped. He offered guidance, never condemnation, and over time, the boy's frustration would ebb, replaced by quiet resolve. It wasn't long before Anakin began accompanying Yoda on small off-world missions. These were carefully chosen assignments where the stakes were low, typically involving diplomatic efforts or investigations of local disputes. The first such mission took them to the planet Ither, known for its lush, unspoiled nature. A group of settlers had started encroaching on Ithorian land, disturbing local customs and causing unrest. Yoda intended to show Anakin the value of negotiation and respect for different cultures, lessons that went beyond the temple's walls. Arriving by transport, the pair was greeted by the Ithorian priests in a grand floating herdship that drifted above the green canopy. Anakin's eyes widened at the serene beauty of the environment, so different from dusty Tatooine or the metal spires of Coruscant. Over the course of several days, Yoda and Anakin listened to the Ithorian complaints and then met with the settlers. Anakin was initially inclined to side with the Ithorians. He saw them as peaceful beings forced to watch their sacred land be ravaged. But Yoda taught him the importance of empathy on all sides. The settlers, fleeing poverty elsewhere, had hoped to find new land to cultivate. They, too, were driven by fear of scarcity, not malevolence. By guiding discussions calmly and encouraging compromise, Yoda brokered a resolution that protected Ithorian sacred groves, while allowing the settlers limited farmland under strict environmental guidelines. Throughout this process, Anakin watched in wonder as the same calm presence he had seen in Yoda's training manifested in diplomacy. When the mission concluded, Yoda asked Anakin what he had learned. The boy replied that understanding people's fears and needs was key to helping them find peace. Yoda nodded, pleased. Returning to Coruscant, Anakin found his perspective subtly altered. He began to see that being a Jedi extended far beyond saber technique and the intricacies of the Force. It was about compassion, patience, and a willingness to serve as an instrument of harmony. Before, he had harbored fantasies of heroism, imagining himself as a valiant knight single-handedly saving the oppressed. Now he realized that grand gestures could mean little without wisdom. Yoda would occasionally remind him that to truly help people, one must delve beneath the surface of conflicts, to the fears and desires that drove individuals to discord. Such insights sank into Anakin's mind, intertwining with his innate desire to save others. Still, the same old longings sometimes reemerged. Late at night, as he gazed over the city lights of Coruscant, Anakin would remember Tatooine. He wondered if his mother was safe, if she was healthy, if she ever thought of him. His training taught him to acknowledge and release these fears, yet he couldn't fully banish them. A part of him felt that as long as his mother remained in slavery, he was failing her. Yoda sensed this internal struggle and consoled him, gently instructing that a Jedi must help the galaxy as a whole. The desire to protect loved ones was natural, but a Jedi's calling was broader. Still, the day would come, Yoda promised, when Anakin might find a way to aid his mother through legitimate means, without succumbing to fear or anger. Anakin was about 14 when the Jedi Council assigned Yoda and him to observe a dispute on the planet Alderaan. This mission was a bit more complex than Ither's case. The Alderaanian monarchy was dealing with an insurrectionist group that believed Alderaan was abdicating its pacifist traditions by engaging in certain trade agreements that funded weapons manufacturing elsewhere. The group was rumored to have ties with a radical organization. Although violence was minimal on Alderaan, tension was rising. Upon landing, they were greeted by the graceful cityscape that seemed to blend seamlessly with nature. Towers of shimmering stone, beautiful waterfalls, and wide plazas filled with art and music gave Alderaan a reputation for culture and peace. Yet below this serene surface, political undercurrents churned. Bail Organa, an influential senator, welcomed Yoda and Anakin with great respect. While Yoda engaged in diplomacy, Anakin wandered through the palace's corridors, observing officials and staff. He noted the subtle worry in their expressions. He overheard whispers about possible terrorist attacks. Eager to be involved, he reported his observations to Yoda, who commended his vigilance. Over the next several days, the pair attended negotiations and mediated talks between the monarchy, the insurrectionists, and neutral parties. During one heated meeting, a frustrated rebel leader stormed out, threatening to detonate a device that would destroy a crucial communications hub. The palace guards scrambled. Yoda, with quiet but firm resolve, asked Anakin to remain calm and centered. The boy, heart-pounding, joined Yoda in combing through the city, following faint clues left behind in the Force. They eventually found the rebel leader near a deserted transport station. He was disillusioned, half-mad with anger at what he saw as his government's betrayal. Anakin sensed the man's pain and fear, feeling empathy even as the threat loomed. With gentle but persistent persuasion, the Jedi duo disarmed him and convinced him to hand over the detonator. The man broke down in tears, lamenting the families who had starved or lost hope while Alderaan turned a blind eye. Taking the detonator, Anakin realized how crucial compassion was in such situations. The greatest battles were not always won with lightsabers. Their efforts in preventing the attack strengthened Alderaan's path to a more open dialogue. Bail Organa expressed gratitude, remarking that such interventions by the Jedi showed how the Order served as guardians of peace. Anakin felt a surge of pride, and Yoda reminded him that humility was crucial. Though the mission had ended successfully, the seeds of conflict in the galaxy ran deeper than one planet's dispute. In quiet moments, Yoda confided in Anakin that dark stirrings in the Force suggested a grander conflict might be brewing, though its contours remained hidden. Something overshadowed the horizon, an unseen threat that the Jedi might not be prepared to face. Anakin's heart quickened. He vowed to be ready for whatever lay ahead. Years continued to pass, and Anakin progressed from a young boy to a maturing Padawan. His lightsaber skills became formidable, guided by Yoda's mastery. He had learned to harness the Force in ways that allowed him to influence the world around him subtly or with great power, depending on the need. Yet Yoda never stopped emphasizing the importance of self-awareness and emotional control. Anakin began to resemble a calm presence among his peers, though flashes of impulsiveness still emerged from time to time. When he was 16, the Council decided it was time for him to accompany Yoda on a more challenging set of negotiations. This time, the stakes were higher. The Trade Federation, under increasing influence from a charismatic politician named Palpatine, was exerting pressure on smaller worlds, seeking trade routes and resource exploitation. Tensions had sparked in the Outer Rim, where the Federation's blockade of certain planets led to widespread suffering. Palpatine, a rising senator from Naboo, had a reputation for championing disenfranchised worlds, and his voice in the Senate grew stronger by the day. In private, Yoda expressed caution about Palpatine. The man exuded a subtle aura that was difficult to interpret. On the surface, he seemed kind and concerned, yet there was a lurking sense of calculation behind his seemingly benevolent smile. During a session in the Jedi Temple's main hall, Yoda explained the mission to Anakin. They would travel to a small planet named Ciri, on the edges of the Outer Rim, where the Federation had set up a blockade. Tensions were high. Local merchants and farmers found themselves unable to export goods, leading to poverty and unrest. Palpatine had proposed a Senate intervention, but the wheels of bureaucracy turned slowly. Jedi involvement was to be discreet. Yoda wanted to gather information and see how negotiations might be steered toward a peaceful resolution. Anakin nodded, eager to help. Deep down, he felt sympathy for those oppressed, thinking of how Tatooine had been a backwater of suffering and exploitation. Arriving in Ciri's orbit, they witnessed multiple Federation battleships looming ominously. The planet itself glowed with a bright turquoise hue, ringed by swirling clouds. Upon landing, they found a tense atmosphere in the main city. Federation droids patrolled the streets, and local vendors were forced to pay steep fees to move goods. Yoda and Anakin met with the planetary governor, a weary-faced woman named Verona. She lamented that her people were starving. Trade had been strangled, and the Federation demanded exclusive mining rights in exchange for lifting the blockade. Verona refused, fearing ecological devastation. Yoda reassured her that the Jedi would assist in seeking a just resolution. Walking through the city streets, Anakin felt a surge of anger at the injustice he witnessed. Children begging for scraps of food, families unable to get medical supplies. Droids brandished blasters, enforcing the blockade with mechanical indifference. He could sense the local citizens' mounting desperation. Yoda guided him to remain focused and not let anger cloud his judgment. Together, they tried to open a dialogue with the Federation's representative, a Neimoidian named Gunray. The negotiations were icy at best, with the official claiming that the blockade was a mere trade dispute, easily resolved if Ciri cooperated. As the talks dragged on, Anakin found it increasingly hard to hide his frustration. He thought to himself, if I just used the Force to push these droids aside, if I threatened them, maybe they'd yield. But Yoda sensed this line of thinking and reminded him, control, a Jedi must have. Rash action, suffering can cause. The tension in the city boiled over when a group of Ciri rebels attacked a droid patrol. Blaster fire erupted, sending passers-by fleeing. Anakin and Yoda rushed to intervene, igniting their lightsabers. Anakin's blade glowed blue, humming with each swift arc. He deflected blaster bolts effortlessly, while Yoda nimbly leapt among the attackers, using minimal force to disarm the rebels and disable the droids. No life was lost, but the damage to the city block was extensive. In the aftermath, tearful civilians approached, pleading for Jedi help. Anakin felt torn. Part of him wanted to lead them to victory, to liberate them from oppression. Yoda reminded him that the Jedi were peacekeepers, not an occupying army, and that a diplomatic solution would serve the long-term well-being of Ciri. Eventually, they succeeded in persuading Gunray to ease the blockade in exchange for certain trade concessions that did not endanger Ciri's environment. The resolution was far from perfect, but it alleviated the immediate crisis. Departing, Yoda sensed Anakin's unease. The boy, nearly a young man now, believed that more direct action against the Federation might have resulted in a better outcome. Yoda's expression was sorrowful yet firm. He counseled patience. The galaxy operated in shades of gray, and the Jedi had to work within a framework that preserved peace and minimized suffering. Overthrowing the Federation by force might solve one problem only to unleash many others. Anakin mulled over these words, still feeling a residual ache in his chest at the sight of families condemned to a tenuous compromise. Upon returning to the temple, they found the atmosphere shifting. Whispers of separatist movements began to circulate among the Jedi, indicating that various star systems were considering breaking away from the Republic. The Council, always looking for the bigger picture, conferred about mysterious occurrences and suspect dealings behind the scenes. The clones, rumored to be developed on Kamino, were another source of speculation. Politically, Chancellor Palpatine's influence grew, and the Senate approved new measures to raise an army for the Republic, should these secessions spread. Yoda and the Council were uneasy. War was something the Jedi had always aimed to prevent, and yet it seemed inexorably closer. As the threat of the Clone Wars loomed, Master Yoda stood before Anakin, instructing him in advanced lightsaber forms. By now, Anakin was proficient in several styles Shiicho, Makashi, Sorisu. Yoda introduced him to Adaru's acrobatic techniques, though Anakin found that Form V, Gemso, suited his natural aggression and strength. The training sessions became more intense. Sometimes, Yoda's small frame blurred in leaps and spins, forcing Anakin to parry from awkward angles. Anakin embraced the challenge, pushing his skills to new heights. Despite their difference in size and age, they formed a formidable tandem in sparring matches, the onlooking Jedi struck by the synergy between them. Yet Yoda never ceased reminding Anakin of the importance of the mental and emotional aspects of being a Jedi. He would say, "Beware the easy path of victory. Through overconfidence, many have fallen." Anakin nodded, absorbing the lesson, though a part of him yearned to test the limits of his abilities. As the galaxy edged toward open conflict, more missions called them away from the temple, putting them in volatile situations where quick thinking and negotiation were paramount. They encountered pockets of unrest on worlds like Alderaan, Collar, and Malastare. Each experience added layers to Anakin's understanding of galactic politics and the suffering that seemed to sprout at every turn. Then came the day the Republic officially announced the formation of the Grand Army, spurred by the discovery of the clone troopers on Kamino. Palpatine addressed the Senate with a solemn vow. He would safeguard the Republic against the Separatist threat. Yoda and Anakin, standing among other Jedi in the Senate chamber, listened to the applause echoing through the vast space. Something about the Chancellor's speech made Yoda's ears droop slightly. Anakin sensed it too, a disquiet, a subtle tremor in the Force. But the masses cheered, longing for stability and security. Soon, the Jedi were tasked with leading clone battalions in the role of generals, an uncomfortable shift from their traditional position as peacekeepers. Yoda, recognized as a Grand Master, took a leading role in planning, while Anakin, now older and nearing his trials, prepared to command under Yoda's supervision if war became inevitable. The outbreak of the Clone Wars happened swiftly, triggered by the confrontation on Geonosis, where the Separatist forces revealed their droid armies. In the midst of the frantic rescue of Obi-Wan Kenobi, Padme Amidala, and the unraveling of Count Dooku's plan, Yoda and Anakin arrived with clone reinforcements. The sudden shift to open battle was jarring for Anakin, who had spent years learning to defuse violence, only to be thrust into a war zone. Amid the swirling dust and the hiss of energy blasts, he fought alongside Yoda, deflecting bolts and surging forward to protect retreating clones. The Jedi, once stoic diplomats, moved as soldiers among soldiers. Dooku eventually escaped, wounded by Yoda's brief confrontation, but the war had begun in earnest. Over the next months, the conflict spread across the galaxy. Yoda, typically at the strategic helm, took Anakin on missions that tested not only their combat skills but their moral fortitude. They liberated besieged worlds, evacuated refugees, and confronted droid armies. Each victory felt hollow, overshadowed by the knowledge that the war was not diminishing but escalating. Anakin's prowess shone. His piloting skills were unmatched, and his lightsaber work was nothing short of spectacular. Many clones came to respect him, calling him General Skywalker, a name that made Anakin beam with pride, but also weighed him with responsibility. Yoda reminded him that the clones were not mere expendable tools. They were living beings, each with a unique identity. Treat them as such, Yoda insisted, and you will remain a true Jedi. During these campaigns, Palpatine kept a close eye on Anakin's heroics. Now and then, the Chancellor would summon him to discuss strategic matters, praising his bravery and skill. Anakin felt flattered by the attention of such a powerful figure. Palpatine's genuine interest in Anakin's well-being and progress made the young Jedi feel special. Sometimes Palpatine would share small secrets, an insight into Senate politics or a promise of future reforms. He portrayed himself as a humble servant of the people, one who saw the Jedi as essential partners. Yoda cautioned Anakin to stay vigilant, reminding him that politicians often wielded honeyed words. Yet the Chancellor seemed so affable, so concerned about the fate of the Republic, that it was hard to regard him with suspicion. Amid the intensifying war, Yoda decided it was nearly time for Anakin's Jedi trials. Traditionally, the trials measured skill, courage, spirit, and insight. However, the war itself had become a crucible for all Jedi. Many in the Order believed that Anakin's repeated demonstrations of valor in battle qualified as trials in their own right. But Yoda still wanted to test Anakin's spiritual readiness, to ensure that beneath his exceptional power lay the moral clarity and discipline needed for knighthood. So, in a rare moment of respite, Yoda brought Anakin back to the temple, where they met privately in one of the highest spire meditation chambers. The windows there revealed Coruscant's never-ending horizon of floating traffic and luminous spires. In this sanctum, Yoda guided Anakin into a deep trance, instructing him to face his deepest fears and attachments. In that meditative state, Anakin experienced visions of Tatooine, of his mother in peril, and of friends dying in the war. Rage and sorrow threatened to pull him under. But remembering Yoda's lessons, he breathed and let the Force guide him to acceptance, if not comfort. He saw how fear of loss could transform into tyranny if harnessed by the dark side. He saw the potential for greatness shining within him, but also the dark echo of possibilities if he ever allowed ambition and anger to reign unchecked. His body trembled, sweat beading on his brow, until finally he emerged from the trance, heart pounding. Yoda gently told him that this was only the beginning of true self-knowledge, and that he must always be mindful of the illusions fear could create. Shortly after, the council convened. Mace Windu, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Obi-Wan Kenobi, who had risen in rank and respect within the Order, and the others deliberated. Anakin Skywalker had shown mastery of the Force, skill with the lightsaber, bravery in battle, and compassion toward the innocent. His loyalty to the Jedi cause was clear. His presence in the Force was an undeniable boon. His trials, though unorthodox, were deemed satisfied. Yoda offered a final measure of approval, his voice quiet but strong as he pronounced Anakin ready to become a Jedi Knight. Kneeling before the council, Anakin felt his throat constrict with emotion as Yoda ignited a lightsaber to ceremonially cut the Padawan braid that hung behind Anakin's ear. The ancient master's eyes shone with pride, although tempered by the knowledge of the difficulties that still lay ahead. Now a knight, Anakin found his responsibilities increased. He led his own battalion of clones in the ever-worsening Clone Wars. Though Yoda remained a mentor and guide, the structure of the war demanded that senior Jedi be scattered across numerous fronts. Sometimes, months would pass before Anakin saw Yoda again in person. Still, when they did meet, Yoda would check in on his emotional state, quietly assessing whether Anakin's restlessness had grown or receded. The war's chaos and bloodshed took a toll on every Jedi's spirit, and Anakin was no exception. He saw countless innocents caught in the crossfire. He witnessed clones he had come to regard as brothers perish in battles orchestrated by faceless droids. It weighed heavily upon him, stirring his old impulses to forcibly eliminate the root of the problem. Yet he tried to channel Yoda's wisdom, patience, compassion, a willingness to find balance in every choice. Amid this turmoil, Palpatine's counsel grew more frequent. The Chancellor would occasionally beckon Anakin to his office, high in the Senate District Tower, to discuss strategy or to commend him on some victory. These private conversations led to Palpatine revealing insights into the war's hidden complexities, always hinting that the Jedi Council might be too narrow in their approach. He flattered Anakin's strengths, suggesting that Anakin's special gifts set him apart. After each meeting, Anakin left with a whirl of conflicting thoughts. He trusted Yoda above all else, yet a voice inside him wondered if the council was too mired in tradition to see the war's realities. Palpatine's words whispered that swift, decisive action could end the conflict sooner, saving lives. Though Anakin tried to shake off such ideas, they lingered. When Palpatine discovered that Tatooine had fallen under deeper Hutt control during the war, he used it to play on Anakin's anxieties. He implied that, with the right power, Anakin could influence the galaxy to eradicate slavery altogether, to free those in bondage as he once had been. These half-promises struck at Anakin's core desire. He remembered Yoda's caution: fear and anger were the trap. Yet the thought of truly ending slavery ignited a fierce hope in him. He confided in Yoda about his desire to help Tatooine specifically. Yoda sympathized but warned that a Jedi could not become a crusader for his personal grievances. He must serve the broader force. This tension gnawed at Anakin. The sense of frustration grew each time he saw another planet ravaged, another population enslaved by oppressive systems or warlords. Then came the moment the Council began to suspect Palpatine's real intentions. His emergency powers, once intended to be temporary, remained in effect long after the immediate crises had passed. Rumors surfaced that he intended to stay in office indefinitely. Yoda and Mace Windu began investigating. They felt swirling shadows in the Force, something deeply connected to the dark side. Intelligence from various fronts suggested that Count Dooku, a former Jedi turned Sith, was working on secret projects that threatened the Republic's stability. Yoda tried to piece these clues together, suspecting a puppet master behind the scenes. But time was short, and battles flared in multiple sectors. Events spiraled rapidly. On a mission to capture Dooku on Tithe, Anakin crossed sabers with the Sith apprentice. Fueled by the memory of how the war had cost so many lives, Anakin fought relentlessly. Dooku, cunning and agile, baited him with taunts about the Republic's hypocrisy. In a final exchange, Anakin's anger surged, and he came close to delivering a killing blow. But he remembered Yoda's voice, urging restraint. He pulled back at the last second, giving Dooku the opening to escape. Anakin cursed himself, frustration boiling. Upon returning to the temple, he confessed his near slip to Yoda, who placed a comforting hand on the young knight's shoulder. The master told him that true victory lay in preserving one's soul, not just besting an enemy. Anakin accepted this counsel, though the sting of missed opportunity lingered. Yoda recognized that this was the crucial juncture. If Anakin believed that love could justify tapping into darkness, then everything they had worked for could unravel. The Jedi Master pleaded with him to trust in the Force, to relinquish the illusions of control and focus on the will of the living Force. A heavy sadness weighed on Yoda's heart as he saw doubt flicker in Anakin's eyes. The war had left the boy vulnerable, battered by too many horrors too quickly. It was not that Yoda blamed himself for failing as a teacher. He had done what he could in the midst of a galaxy aflame. But he felt the pressure of destiny pressing upon Anakin. The Force still resonated around the young knight like a blazing star. The days that followed rushed toward a climax. Palpatine, seizing on intelligence that the Jedi planned to remove him from power for refusing to relinquish emergency powers, declared the Jedi traitors to the Republic. In the temple, alarms blared. Troopers who had once followed Jedi commands now turned on them under Order 66. Across Coruscant, battles erupted. Yoda, who had been conferring with Mace Windu and other masters, felt the Force scream in agony as dozens of Jedi were cut down. Confusion, betrayal, and heartbreak filled the temple halls. Yoda and Mace made a desperate decision to confront Palpatine directly. They moved swiftly, hoping Anakin would join them. But Anakin, torn to the core, was already ensnared by Palpatine's manipulations. The Chancellor had spun a narrative of a Jedi coup, claiming the Order wanted to weaken the Republic. With the memory of Dooku's execution weighing heavily and the fear that the Jedi would never truly act to save those Anakin loved, the young knight arrived at Palpatine's office in chaos. Mace Windu attempted to arrest Palpatine, and a furious lightsaber duel ensued. When the Chancellor unleashed unimaginable power, Mace managed to gain the upper hand, disarming the Sith. But as he stood poised to strike the final blow, Anakin intervened, the echo of fear and longing welling up within him. In that fateful moment, he lashed out, severing Mace's hand. Palpatine's lightning then sent the Jedi Master plummeting to his death below. Yoda, racing to the scene, arrived seconds too late. He found Palpatine, scarred and twisted, and Anakin at his side, eyes brimming with shock and horror at what he had done. The wave of darkness crashed around them. Palpatine, revealing himself as Darth Sidious, wasted no time. He attacked Yoda with ferocity. The diminutive master retaliated, a flurry of green lightsaber arcs, but Anakin, still reeling, struggled to make sense of his actions. Torn, he watched as Yoda and Sidious clashed, unleashing the Force in surges that made the entire building quake. The fight raged, lightning crackling, sabers shrieking. Yoda, centuries old and deeply attuned to the Force, matched Sidious blow for blow. But the cunning Sith had prepared for this confrontation. When it became clear that the building structure was failing under the stress, Palpatine redirected a chunk of debris. Yoda dodged, but in doing so, lost the advantage. A blast of energy hurled him across the chamber. Bruised and stunned, he tried to rise, but Palpatine pinned him with a tide of dark side energy. Anakin stood transfixed at the threshold, heart pounding, as Sidious demanded he strike Yoda down to prove his loyalty. The young knight remembered all the teachings, all the love and mentorship Yoda had given him. The visions, the fear, everything converged in that moment. Trembling, he stepped forward. His mind flashed with images. Yoda guiding him through the temple halls, Yoda instructing him to meditate, Yoda cautioning him that fear leads to the dark side, and Yoda standing by him during the Jedi trials. Outside, the city boomed with distant explosions as the clone troopers carried out Order 66. Sidious sneered, urging Anakin onward. "Fulfill your destiny," he hissed. Torn beyond measure, Anakin gazed at Yoda, who lay pinned under crackling energy. The small master's eyes locked onto Anakin's, a silent plea to remember who he was. In that final, decisive instant, Anakin felt the Force surge through him, not in anger but in clarity. He realized that everything Yoda had ever taught him pointed to this choice. The choice to cast aside fear, to protect rather than destroy. Summoning all his strength, Anakin lunged at Sidious, not Yoda. The Sith Lord, taken by surprise, whirled to defend. Their lightsabers met with a scorching crash. Anakin poured his anguish and hope into each strike, pushing Sidious back. Freed from the dark side's hold for a precious moment, he was fueled by a desperate need to right his wrongs. Sidious, though powerful, was momentarily caught off guard by Anakin's reversal. Yoda seized the opportunity, gathering the Force to free himself from the oppressive energy. Together, Master and Knight pressed Sidious into a losing corner. The Force roiled like a storm, crackling with pent-up tension. Sensing defeat, the Sith Lord unleashed a final barrage of lightning. Anakin and Yoda combined their power, deflecting it, forcing the crackling surge back upon Sidious. Screaming in denial, the Dark Lord was consumed by the arcing light, the echoes of his own malevolence swirling around him. The office windows shattered, letting in the howling winds of Coruscant's night sky. When it ended, the echo of thunder remained. Sidious lay motionless, his once imposing presence in the Force extinguished. Anakin, panting, dropped to his knees, struggling to process what had transpired. Yoda stood, battered and weak, yet alive. Swiftly, the news spread that the Chancellor had fallen, and with him the source of Order 66. Many clones, now freed from the Sith's direct mental manipulations, halted their assault, confused by contradictory commands. The temple still burned, and countless Jedi had been lost, but the extermination was not complete. Anakin, tears in his eyes, told Yoda he was sorry. Sorry for everything, from Mace Windu's death to the near betrayal of his own soul. The ancient master, though sorrowful, placed a trembling hand on Anakin's shoulder. "Redeemed by your choices, you are," Yoda said quietly. "Live on, you must, and rebuild we shall." In the aftermath, the Senate reeled from the revelation that their beloved Chancellor was a Sith Lord. The Republic had no immediate leader, and the Jedi, decimated yet not entirely destroyed, scrambled to maintain order. On Coruscant, Yoda and Anakin led efforts to extinguish the fires in the temple. Survivors were gathered, wounded were tended to. The Old Master oversaw the rescue of holocrons and archives that had survived the chaos, while Anakin, burdened by guilt, helped reorganize the battered ranks of Jedi. Among the ruins, he found glimmers of hope. A handful of younglings who had hidden in sealed chambers, a group of knights who had barricaded themselves in the meditation wing. The tragedy was immense, but the order was not utterly lost. Over the following weeks, the Senate, guided by the influential senators Padme Amidala and Bail Organa, began a slow process of healing. A transitional council was formed to restore the Republic's democratic processes. With Palpatine gone, the separatist movement lost its central figure of manipulation, and peace negotiations became feasible. Worlds that had seceded began to reintegrate, no longer influenced by the orchestrated crises Palpatine had engineered. The clones, many of whom had their inhibitor chips disabled or removed following Sidious's death, sought new paths. Some integrated into local security forces, while others accompanied the Jedi in relief efforts throughout the galaxy. The Jedi Order, bruised but not broken, dedicated itself to reasserting its genuine role as peacekeepers. As for Anakin Skywalker, his life entered a new phase. Having broken free from the brink of darkness and helped defeat Sidious, he became a symbol of redemption, of the fragile balance every Jedi must maintain. Yoda, scarred both physically and emotionally, continued to serve as the guiding pillar of the Order. Though saddened by the lives lost, he felt the Force realigning, the tension in the cosmic tapestry easing. He recognized that Anakin's destiny had always been to confront that darkness. Had Yoda not taken Anakin as his Padawan, the boy might have fallen entirely under Palpatine's thrall, plunging the galaxy into a longer, darker night. The road ahead was not easy. Pain lingered, and the war's devastation would take years to heal. The Jedi needed to rebuild their temple, their membership, and their credibility. The people of the galaxy, betrayed by one of their highest officials, hesitated to trust again so soon. But hope endured. Planets once overshadowed by fear now looked to the Jedi for guidance. Initiates once hidden away emerged to train anew, learning the lessons gleaned from this darkest chapter in the Order's history. And at the heart of it, Yoda and Anakin worked side by side, forging a new understanding of the Force, one that embraced compassion without possessing, that recognized power without letting it consume. Together, they scouted for lost or hidden Force-sensitive children, offering them a place in a reborn Order that strove to be humbler, kinder, and more attuned to the living Force than ever before. In the months that followed, Anakin quietly traveled to Tatooine at last, with Yoda's blessing. He found his mother free, having been liberated during the war by local reformers. Their reunion was tearful, overshadowed by the knowledge of how close Anakin had come to losing himself. But in that desert twilight, mother and son embraced under Tatooine's dual suns, forging a sense of closure that Anakin had feared might never come. When he returned to Coruscant, he carried a lighter heart. Rebuilding the temple was a monumental task. Its once grand spires had been scorched by the betrayal of clones under Sidious's command. Yet brick by brick, the Jedi and volunteers from across the galaxy began to restore it. New chambers were erected, the archives painstakingly pieced back together. Statues of lost masters were raised in memorial. In this reconstruction, Anakin discovered new purpose. Where once his ambition had been a subtle thirst for recognition, now it became a desire to ensure the Order never again lost its way through politics or fear. Yoda supported him, reflecting on the days when he had first taken Anakin as a small boy under his tutelage, how bright and uncertain that future had been, and how, in the end, the Force had guided them to a new dawn. Eventually, the reconstituted Senate elected an interim chancellor whose authority was more carefully checked. Bail Organa, Padme Amidala, Mon Mothma, and other prominent senators worked diligently to pass reforms that championed transparency and promoted diplomacy over militarization. The war-weary galaxy hungered for peace. Though tensions still simmered, remnants of separatist factions, pockets of criminal syndicates, traces of the empire that almost was, the central threat had been neutralized. The Jedi Order, working in tandem with a chastened Senate, used negotiation, cultural exchange, and humanitarian missions to douse lingering embers of conflict. In this new era, the Jedi learned from past mistakes, focusing less on strict dogma and more on empathy, forging real connections with the people they served. Anakin, now recognized across the galaxy as the Jedi who had stood up to the Sith at the final hour, garnered both admiration and scrutiny. Some questioned whether a former slave boy from Tatooine should hold so much influence. Others celebrated him as the embodiment of the Force's will. But Anakin himself, tempered by guilt and gratitude, paid little heed to fame. He spent his days training new apprentices, traveling on missions of assistance, or standing at Yoda's side, offering counsel based on the perspective of one who had nearly given in to darkness. This second chance drove him to become the best version of himself. A Jedi who could blend compassion with courage, who could wield power without letting it rule him. And Yoda, who had once hesitated to train Anakin, recognized the profound significance of having done so. By devoting time to carefully nurture the boy's staggering potential, by guiding him through each pitfall and fear, Yoda had sown the seeds of hope. In the final reckoning, that hope had prevailed. The Force, mysterious and boundless, had woven events in a way that no single being could fully comprehend. The old master still grieved the heavy cost. The war, the lost Jedi, the betrayal from within, all weighed on his centuries of memory. But amid that grief, he felt gratitude that the chosen child had not slipped into the endless night. As Coruscant's skyline sparkled with new promise, as refugees returned to worlds once devastated by conflict, as children once again played in the temple courtyards, a renewed sense of harmony settled across the galaxy. The far horizons were not without challenge, but the Jedi were prepared to meet them with humility. Together, Yoda and Anakin gazed upon the new temple spires, standing as a reminder that the Force was ever in motion, guiding and challenging them to remain vigilant, compassionate, and wise. And so, with each passing sunrise, the memory of what could have been, a galaxy enveloped by darkness, remained a cautionary whisper. Anakin's journey stood as proof that destiny was not fixed, that a single choice at the tipping point could change everything. The bond between Master Yoda and Anakin Skywalker, forged in those early years of training, had withstood the brutal test of the Clone Wars and Palpatine's machinations. In that bond lay the promise of a galaxy forever changed by hope, reborn from the ashes of near ruin. Though scars remained, the path forward was illuminated by the light of the Force and the enduring trust between mentor and student, who had walked the thin line between salvation and destruction, and ultimately chosen the light.